will hand over the stage to you. Enjoy, and I look forward to what you are sharing today.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being here. Just testing, everybody can hear me okay? Yeah, super. Okay, thank you for your time to come in and listen a little bit about design systems. We would like to, first of all, introduce ourselves. My name is Male, Maria Elena. Sabrina, thank you. You mentioned, but I go by Male. I'm from Ecuador, but at the moment I'm living in Germany, and I work in Thoughtworks as a developer. But interesting thing, I used to be a graphic designer, so I really like this world where design and tech meets, and I think design systems is a great opportunity to see that, and I feel I'm really passionate about it. So nice to meet you, you all.
And my name's Esther Butcher. I'm a designer and I'm based in Sydney, Australia, but I've also recently spent some time in Germany. So yeah, I may be the flip side of Male. Primarily a designer, but I also like to write code whenever my teams will let me. And I really love any space where design and developers collaborate. And design systems is really great space for that. So hopefully we can share some of our experiences today with you all. I'll kick us off with just a bit of an agenda, tell you what it is that we're going to be talking about. We'll start with a kind of brief introduction to what a design system is and kind of introduce how we think the product thinking and the product mindset kind of fits there. After that, we'll cover some ideas around understanding your users, and your users in this case, I guess, are the consumers of the design system. So we're talking about designers and developers within organizations, most likely. Who are actually using this day to day, and thinking about how you can find the value that you can provide to those people. After that, we'll look at some ways that we can start to take small steps towards that value. So not thinking that we have to answer all the questions up front, but finding small ways to get started. And finally, when you start small, you never want to lose sight of the big picture. So we'll finish with some topics that will likely come up along the way and give you some thoughts and experiences that we've had with them. So who is this talk for? We think it's mainly for practitioners. So we want to talk to the people who are on the ground and making decisions about design systems. But if you do happen to be a leader within an organization, or maybe more of a product owner, and you're kind of having people come to you and say, hey, we need a design system, we hope that you'll take away some maybe insights and empathy for the people who are trying to kind of get these sort of things started, and maybe even be in a better position to be able to help and support them along the way. We are going to assume some knowledge of design systems. There are lots of really great introductory books and blogs and a really great Slack community as well. I'm sure you'll be able to Google it and find it. But instead of really covering those basics, we would like to give you a new perspective on design systems and a new way of thinking about them, and then some tips and tricks you can kind of apply and take away. And of course, we'd like to start a conversation with you all. One of the big themes of our talk is about how this is a journey that you need to work out for yourself. So we'd really love to hear more about what things you've tried within your organization and what things are working and not. So with that in mind,
we can start. So maybe with the beginning, what is a design system? We want to go quickly on this so we have everybody's on the same page of what we're referring to. And pretty much it seems that nobody knows. I'm kidding. We know, and a lot of people know. Actually, if you go out in the internet and ask what is a design system, you actually might get a ton of different answers. I like this Sarah Federman post where you can actually ask 100 people and you will get 100 different answers. And one of those answers is one we want to focus in particular, just so we understand what we're talking about. A design system is pretty much a library of tools, and these tools can be either code or design tools. First of all, very well documented because you want people to use them, of course, and this can be released by individuals, teams, or a community with the sole goal that developing or creating digital products could be a more efficient and cohesive or consistent endeavor. So Pretty much, I think the reason why we can find so many definitions out there is because everybody's trying to pin down the set of tools you need to use or you need to create or come by when you're talking about design systems. And the thing is, the challenge doesn't start when building the tools. The challenge really starts when you need to figure out which tools you need to build. And this is what we want to talk about today. We want to think about design systems as a product, and we like this definition that we think I think it's a bit more poetic, but it goes more to the point we want to make today. So from Brad Frost, the writer of Atomic Design, if maybe some of you have heard about him, a design system is a humble product in service of other products. So I really like that he acknowledged first of all, that this is a product we're talking about. And it's also the story on how your organization designs and builds digital products. So I love this word story because it has so much meaning on how you make the thing you need and you write your own story, right? So I really like these definitions, and pretty much what we're saying, in other words, is that a design system is whatever you need it to be. So you build it so it actually fits your needs, pretty much like a product. So this gets us to the question of which needs are we talking about? So when we get to these questions, you can think about product thinking, and everything, including in design systems, starts with your user. So you have a user, and of course, your users could have needs that we generally call them problems, right? And the reason why we create products is so that we can bring value to our users. We can solve or find a way to solve their problems. But in the middle of this, of course, is us. We are the ones creating the product, and we need to consider some things. And if you look out there for the design systems that are in the wild, you can get overwhelmed sometimes. There could be huge, made by huge companies and renowned companies, and it can sound like an overwhelming task. Like if you think about, you need to think about management strategy, maybe ownership funding, and things like this. So it can get overwhelming, but we're here to actually tell you that don't worry about that, because you can start small. And as every other product, you can start bringing value from the very beginning. So it's not that you need to build this gigantic design system for it to work or to be useful for you, but it's just finding the ways where you can start small. As long as you don't forget that there's also this big picture. We're talking about a system, right? So it's not just about tools again. It can compose more things that are easy to forget. We're gonna mention some of them during this presentation. And finally, during this journey, don't forget why you do this. You're always doing this for your users. So a design system is not a project. It's something you start today and you finish in 3 months and it's done. A design system is this product that will have a life cycle, will always have to benefit your users, and at some point it won't anymore, towards you will stop using it then. So with all this said, let's start with our users.
Yeah, indeed, always a very good place to start. There's this kind of famous UX saying that you've probably heard, and it says, you are not your users. And kind of the strange thing about design systems is that you kind of are, aren't you? I mean, you might be a designer or a developer who's on a product team, or at least you would have experience building digital products. So it could kind of be easy to think that, do you even need research? Is that important when you're designing a design system? So I thought I'd tell you the story about a team that I was in once. We already had a component library and some documentation that was mainly targeted towards developers. And we were starting to think about a sketch library and what that would look like. And we were part of the UX team. So I knew all the people who would kind of be using this thing we were building. And they knew that we were going to build it. So instead of, I guess, just starting to pitch it to them, hey, we're going to make this great thing, you should use it. Instead, I put my research hat on, and we actually sat down and did interviews with all of the designers and asked them to show us how they worked, show us their current sketch library, talk to us about what was working and not working well for them. So the first person that I spoke to had the most complicated sketch library I think I've ever seen. He had symbols that were, nested within symbols, nested, within libraries. He had these really complicated responsive symbols where within 3 clicks you could go from mobile to desktop views. Really, really I've never seen anything like it since. And then the second person that I spoke to, we were having this conversation and he was talking about symbols, but when he actually opened his sketch file up, I could see he wasn't using symbols at all. He just had a page of all of the elements, and every time he needed it, he would kind of copy and paste it into the place that he needed it. And then the third person that I spoke to, she just had a completely different workflow. Her work was completely different. She had a kind of multi-brand experience, a white labeled product. So she might do a high fidelity mockup for one brand, but then a lot of the time she just spent it pairing with developers in the browser, kind of fixing up all of the issues that happened as it got converted across multiple different brands. And I think the really different points of view from those three people show why research is so important, even when you have some personal experience in that area, because you never really know until you ask how different people think, how they work, and how then a design system can kind of fit in with their world. I mean, I guess as a designer, I've spent a lot of time in a lot of strange places trying to understand my users. I've sat in car parks with contractors who are installing communication networks. I've sat in the houses of people who are taking heart medication. And when I design systems, I might sit next to a developer who's fixing a visual regression testing suite. And I might watch a developer try to copy and paste code and try to troubleshoot it, but not read documentation. And so I really would encourage and stress how important it is to still start with research. And whether you've had a design system for a while or you're just starting out, it's never too late to sit with those product teams, see how they work, and kind of understand where you can provide them some value. So let's talk about where the value is. Once you understand your user need, you want to try to understand how a design system then can help. So we're going to go through 3 questions that will kind of help you to frame that thinking. So the first one is to summarize your research, right? What opportunities or problems did you find? And maybe try to focus in on the top couple. There could be so many different things that come up, but we'll go through a couple of examples. So you might be seeing a real customer impact. There might be a whole bunch of different product teams. They're trying to make great decisions. Everyone's kind of, doing their best. But when you step back and look at the whole experience, the customers are kind of feeling the pain of that. And maybe your business is as well. You might be generating more support requests, or you might be seeing a drop off across some of your key kind of, acquisition funnels, or just a general kind of reduced trust in your brand. Or maybe it's a team kind of things that you're hearing. You kind of talk to people within teams and they're saying, I just feel like I'm solving the same problem over and over again. Every project that I go to, I just design the same UI elements, I just develop the same UI elements, and everyone kind of feels like maybe this is not the best use of their time. Or perhaps, really, your teams were kind of working okay, but things have changed as you've grown. And people, when you talk to them, are looking for tools and things that will help them to kind of scale the way that they work. But whatever these things are, whatever comes up for you in your organization, like I say, try to focus on 1 or 2 of those things, and then really think, will a design system solve this problem? A design system, is a solution for a problem, and it's very valid to decide not to build one. But if you do think that there's some benefit, try to articulate what that is. Perhaps it's something around finding a common language, and that could be across teams or across disciplines. And we'll talk a little bit more about collaboration later, but that common language really is a way of helping you foster that collaboration, kind of hoping that you will get to better solutions, right? Or maybe it's speed. You could think that just by having all assets in the one place, with all the components that are ready to use, people can get started more quickly. Or that actually by creating a design system, you'll be able to create some visibility about what's already been created, kind of, again, focusing on helping your organization move faster. And once you have these 2 things, just do a check that your problems actually will be solved. But, there's some link between those 2 things, and that, the story is making sense. And then I think the other good thing to do is to step back and think about the context of the organization that you're in and think, is now really the right time for us to build a design system? It is an investment. It does take time and effort away from people who could be working on something else. So you do want to make sure that you have some visibility into other things that are happening in your organization and whether it makes sense to do it now. A really, really common one that I've seen in organizations is rebranding. So when you rebrand something, you kind of need to touch all of your application UIs anyway. So it could make sense at that point to start thinking about a design system. Or as we've talked about, maybe you know that your organization has quite aggressive growth targets. They're going to double your team within the next 12 months. And things like that, it could be a good time to start thinking about how you put the right pieces in place to support that scaling. Or perhaps you want to go and have a conversation about, what's coming up on the roadmap. Maybe you want to have a look at some strategic initiatives or some organizational wide things where there could be a strategic benefit, and a design system would really help, I guess, support those things where people in the organization have, I guess, big pieces of work that are important to them. So I think if you can put these three things together, you'll really be able to help people see the problem, sell the value of what a design system or how a design system can help, and then tie it into the larger context of your organization to show why now is a great time to start. And it should help you make progress towards these things, right? So a design system can't be done alone, and you'll need the help and support of other people. So doing an exercise like this with other people will help you get everyone on the same page. It should help you to be able to articulate that value to leadership and to other people, I guess in a position to be able to help and support you. And also help you focus on where to start. It should kind of focus your efforts, which brings us to starting small. So as Malo said in the introduction, it can be quite intimidating to look at all of these really big design systems out there. And you can kind of fall into this thinking that if you don't have a public documentation site and 50 components and all of these blog posts about your methodology, that you don't have a design system and you're not providing value. And I just think that's so far from being true. So let's look at different ways that you can start small. Actually, for me, the project where I fell in love with design systems was something that you might not expect. It was quite a small project with quite a small team. We had 5 people and 6 weeks to build something. And as the designer on that project, I started to pull things together that might look quite familiar. A page like this in my sketch file that had text styles and form inputs and colors and things like this. And one day one of the developers saw it and he said, do you want to create another page in the app? We can pull this out of your sketch file and instead put it in the code. And it sounded like a good idea, so we did it. But I don't think at the time I really realized how drastically that would change the way that I could work. And actually, I ended up being able to work like this in sketches. And on such a short project, it saved us so much time and it gave us such a great method of collaboration between a small team. We could just sketch out ideas really quickly. Maybe if there was something where I did need to do a bit more exploration, I would jump into Sketch. And when the developer got to building something, I would sit down, we would pair, and we would kind of add it to this page in the app. And the best thing was when everything was already there, we could just say, it's one of those, you know what to do. It's already there. And I think this was when I realized that design systems don't have to be huge to really powerfully change the way that teams work together. And that's really what we're trying to do here, right? Is help that collaboration, whether it's between disciplines or across projects. But I am aware that for a lot of people, when they start thinking about design systems, they want to help more than one team. It can be at that point where you think it's worth sharing things across teams, for example. So let's look at some other ways that you can think about starting small by returning to your users. So there are a few different ways, so many different ways to do this, but we'll cover a few of them. You might want to start just by printing out a whole bunch of interfaces and comparing and contrasting the types of elements you see. Or you could take the code version and look through code bases and look at existing styles and components, and again, try to see where there are similarities. Or you could take more of, I guess, a workshop approach and bring a whole bunch of people together within the organization. I've had quite a lot of success with this exercise from Nathan Curtis, which it's basically a worksheet that has a whole list of things that could be in a design system. And you get a bunch of people together and get them crossing out the things that are not relevant to their team and circling the things that they are. And it can be quite powerful just to focus people and get them to see that overlap and see the commonalities. But either way, finding maybe those top 10 or 15 things that people agree they all need and that there's some value in sharing. So this sort of, will probably be familiar to a lot of you, but just even by mapping that on an effort to value matrix, you could very easily kind of turn that into a backlog for your team to get started. But wait, here is the real trick. I bet you that when you try to pick up that first thing, actually, even if it's something that you think is simple, like maybe color, as you start to talk to different people within the organization, it will probably end up being a lot bigger than you realize. You'll talk to someone and they'll say, I don't know, what color should the errors be? And somebody else will say, I'm trying to do graphs and I want, tints and shades of different colors. And somebody else will start asking about dark mode, or, there's lots and lots of things that you could actually do there. And so I think what I would encourage you to do is try to think about slicing your components the same way you would think about slicing any other feature, and really focusing on where's the thing to start at first, what should you look at next, and what can wait until later, because it might be a lot more valuable to do a lot of firsts across a lot of different areas rather than having a lot of color and not a lot of anything else. And I guess another tip would be to start with what you know. That's a really great way to start thinking about what should be in that bucket of first things. And don't try to predict the future. I think that's another thing that can be quite easy to feel as though you need to anticipate the needs of all the teams. So let's look at a few different ways. It could be that you just want to start with the foundations of things. Some color tokens, some typography, the kind of really foundational things that people can build anything with. And then you want to see what they do with them, and then harvest those things back into the design system and grow it that way by actually getting real use cases and bringing them in. Or by maybe if you've got a greenfields project and you're starting from scratch, you just want to build things as you go. Every story, when you add something new, kind of capture it with maybe some lightweight documentation alongside it. Or you could look at kind of the most global things, the things that everybody knows that they need to use. That could be the header that's across, like an e-commerce site, and maybe there's 4 or 5 teams that kind of have UIs that need to all look the same, or a product image, something that's quite specific to your organization. But again, the reason why we start talking about starting small is really that you want to get these feedback loops happening with teams, right? So start small, release early, and set up good feedback loops. And because you want to ensure that the things you're building actually solve the problems that you thought that they would. So find your own way to start small within your organization.
Super. So I think it's super clear that we need to start with the users, and we have seen some things where to start small. But now we're going to talk a little bit about why the design system is the system. So as I said before, it's not just about tools, and during your journey, you're going to discover yourself asking or other people that are using the design system asking some questions. For example, how do people find about this? Or what help do they need to get started with the design system? What if they think they need actually doesn't exist yet? What do they do? Or when there are bugs, who is supposed to fix them, or who is supposed to report to, or how do we do with this? How will changes be handled? how is this thing going to scale? Who is responsible for that scale? And very important as well, who will pay for this? Or like, it requires people and time, right? And it doesn't come for free as much as we want, and we have so much good energy to do it. We need to think about as an investment. So with all these questions posed, in going back to what we said, it's not just about the deliverables. It's not just about building tools. But when you build these tools, these next things that I'm going to mention are going to be needed and can be actually detrimental if you don't have a good organizational culture to solve these kind of things. The first thing is collaboration. So design systems, it's about collaboration. You probably, many of you could be nailing it, could have a great collaboration, but this might be also a pain in some organizations. So there's very many types of collaboration. You probably are used to collaborate among roles, for example, designers and developers, but chances are that with a design system, this is going to scale. You're going to scale definitely to collaborate among teams and even products, depending on how is your structure inside of your organization. So you need to be sure you are providing enough communication channels for people to work together. I had an example on an organization that used to have teams very independent from each other, which is good because we call this agile. So each team is independent to take decisions about the technology they use, about how they design things. And at the end of the day, everybody merged everything together into a single app, which is great, but you need consistency. So you will need to find this trade-off between independence and actually having consistency among the things you're delivering. So think about this, and no matter where you are, if you're nailing it or you are just, you suffer from this, building a design system is a very good opportunity to either start collaborating or scale or improve it. So yeah, don't forget about this. The next thing is about ownership. So we can say ownership when we refer to the tools in the sense of, for example, where the repository lives, where the code lives, who's the owner of the code, yeah. But we can go beyond and we want to refer to ownership on who owns the product, as who is the person or team pushing for this to gain traction, to pursue the value and to keep building this. So we have seen some flavors around ownership that have worked very well. One of these flavors is having a core team that develops the design system, and afterwards it could actually maintain it. So you will have, for example, a PO, a product owner, and a team that is responsible to, of course, go to their users and ask questions and evolve the design system. Another very successful flavor we have on ownership is having a guild. So you can, this is fantastic, you can have one person in each team that actually goes back and builds the design systems, takes decisions, and this is great for feedback loops because and adoption, because you can get these persons to tell their teams about the design system, how fantastic it is, how could it evolve, and they take this back to the guild. So this is also great for sharing tools, because then you don't have one team responsible for things that can create bottlenecks. If it's a platform team, for example, it could be working on different things and then totally forgetting about the design system. So it's another flavor that has been successful for us. The next thing is adoption, and I mentioned it briefly before. As every other product, the fact that it's great, it doesn't mean people are going to use it, because people need to know about it first, right? And as every other product, you need marketing. So I'm not talking about necessarily putting it on Facebook and TV. I'm talking about communicating about it, shout about it, never stop sharing the news of what you're doing. This could be a newsletter, this could be a meeting, a showcase that you do every week, every 2 weeks, where people can find out what is happening. Another good example of this is we talk about starting small, and this means maybe you can have pilot teams that start using the design system early on, and this will give you success stories that you can share with other teams about how this is working. And finally, as we already talked about, if you have the guild, it's really it's much more easier to get adoption. It's kind of like a strategic decision. So you can place people that know about the design system so they can get their teams to start using it. Another important thing to think about is maintenance. We're talking about bugs, we're talking about scaling, we're talking about changes. So who will take care of these things after we have the first pieces of our design system? So it could be, as we already saw, a core team or a guild, or yeah, but we have proven that it's really great if everybody can actually contribute. So let's think about a design system like your open source project in the organization. So if people can actually contribute back, you will get this to be more richer and more like more people using it. So for example, if a team is going to create a new component, and we know it's going to be a component that needs to, everybody's going to use, why not build it directly in the design system? Why build it in their own repository? So encourage them to contribute back. I was in a project last year that did something very cool about it. They gamified this part. So they had rankings for people that collaborate to the design system, either by adding documentation, by adding new components, designing new things, talking to people, and you get mugs and stickers and t-shirts with it. So it's just a good example of how you can make it fun. It doesn't have to be like, oh, this thing, I need to use it. And no, you can totally make it fun. And one thing, important thing to mention is that because everybody's sharing this, of course you need quality. You want this not to break other people, other teams' code or other teams' apps, but you also want to have a good experience when you need to contribute back to the system. So if you have a very hard process, like I need to go through a process of 2 months where everybody's approving this and we go to the next stage, chances are people are not really going to contribute. So try to find a balance in between how do you do this process. And last but not least, yes, it needs funding. You can only go so far with a motivated team that really wants to make this happen. And yeah, I have been there. I have been that developer that is pushing everybody to get it. And it's like, yeah, this is a super cool thing. We should do it. But it's hard to get everybody involved. So at some point you will need to understand how you're going to invest in it. So it could be either by, again, having the core team and you invest in that team, or you tax every other team, or you tax in the delivery. So every other team will know that during their delivery, they're also going to be adding to the system. So things like this help, but overall, more than anything, it's important that you understand this is not an expense necessarily, it's an investment, and it's definitely going to return if you build it right. So you're investing in making not only your internal users, but your external users, your final users will be happy because they will have a consistent experience. They will have less pain. They will have more accessibility with a design system. And your internal users, your developers, designers, your product owners, your product teams will be able to work in a more efficient way. This will give them time to actually solve problems. Nobody wants to keep building a button. Because that's not a real problem. You want to solve app problems, whatever they need to do, and focus on that. So you're definitely investing in making things more efficient. So these were the things we wanted to discuss with you about our experience and things we have gone through when building design systems. And I will just like to close up just mentioning quickly what we have discussed today and what takeaways we would like you to, if you take something out from this talk, is the following. And first of all, a design system, making a design system cannot be a recipe because you need to fit it to your needs and your organization. But building products could be a recipe. We know that. We know how to build products. So always try to apply this product thinking to this, to solving this problem. Second, start with your users. Even if you have experience, ask people around and understand what they actually need and how things need to be built. With this information, you are definitely able to find value. And don't assume directly that what you need is a design system. Try to figure out if this is the right moment. and maybe you need something simpler. Don't forget that you can start small. You don't have to do a very huge design system. I think this is a very good, big mistake I have seen in teams, that they start creating design, like they start creating the product, a greenfield, and they have features to deliver for the product, but they take the first couple of weeks creating a design system, which it's not that efficient because you still need to deliver your features. So why not create components at the same time that you deliver the feature? If you need to create a button, then you create the button. So try always to find ways where you can start small and make this, as soon as possible, you can see feedback and you can see the value. And finally, don't forget the big picture. A design system is much more than tools. And I also would like to mention that you can also start small in these things. You can start small with collaboration, with adoption, and build from there. Learn from what you have done and build on top of that. So just to conclude, again, we think a design system is a product, and it's definitely the story you write for what you need it to be. So please go ahead, write your own recipe, and enjoy the ride because it's actually a very fun one. Thank you so much for your time, and we're here if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Marla and Esther. I'm still laughing about all the wonderful animated GIFs that we've had. I'm a little bit undecided which one's my favorite, but I see lots of questions rolling in. So I'll start reading the first one and I'll be curious what you think about it. So here's the first question. Naming conventions and other structural rules play an important role with design systems. What are your favorite conventions? Do you see an approach becoming the standard?
Maybe I will give not a very exciting answer to that, but and maybe it's because I'm a consultant as well, so I go into organizations and I don't have to own these problems for long term, but I'm really flexible with this. Whatever the team is doing, just go with that. Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe as the developer, Marla, you will have different opinions.
I would always say the rule of thumb, try to generalize as much as possible. So the moment you start naming things that you think they're very, very specific now, like instead of calling something a tile, you call it the shoe tile or something very specific, you could get into trouble where your design system is gonna become like a huge thing that nobody knows where to use and what to use when. So around naming conventions, I think we have a saying as developers, one of the hardest things in development is naming things. So I think it's more about just keep it general, as generic as you want, as you can. And then just leave it to what also fits your organization. So it could be, again, the usual, it depends, but it depends on what you need. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe the one other thing I would say though is I think it's a balance between nobody wants to be stuck in a meeting room discussing naming for 2 months before you build anything, but also you need to have some structure to it so that you're not breaking things for people within the first or you're continually breaking things for people, because that just ends up being a huge amount of work that you're putting onto other teams. So there is some balance there. Yeah, I've used things like actually having components in beta for a while, or some other things where you kind of nut out what those things should be. Yeah, it's a balance.
Thank you, Esther and Marla. And the next question refers to something that Marla said. So Marla, you raised the issue how to stimulate collaboration, and your answer was have enough communication channels. And the question is this really sufficient if the channels are not used? So the question is, how do you motivate people to interact if they prefer to stay in their comfort silo?
Very good question. And I think personally, guilds are very good for this, because you would have somebody that has enough interest to go back and start those communications. So at the end of the day, I think this is also an organizational, cultural thing. And if you don't have this in your organization, maybe, and I think this, you need to work first on this before trying to start building products together. So I don't know if, Esther, you have any other recommendation on how we can stimulate this?
Yeah, it's hard. And I think also as the people who, if you're the people who care about it and want it to grow, then this is probably one of the places you're going to spend a lot of time. So I think relationships help. So if you've got those people, you know, in each team, spending time with them, trying to understand, you know, what else is going on for them, kind of building those relationships and then kind of bringing the things back. Maybe you can frame up the problem or frame up, I guess, you know, some of those meetings or post a question in a Slack channel or whatever it is, but you might be able to do some of that interpretation of, you know, asking the right questions to provoke discussion. Another one is actually, I found really successful is praising people, like create visibility, make people feel good about contributing to things. When people do stuff behind the scenes, shout out and like show that their recognition and their contribution is really valued. That makes people feel good and want to continue to find ways to be involved. So, yeah.
I really love that. Building relationships and praising people. It's a really positive approach to getting people together. Really love that. Thank you, Esther. So I'll jump to the next question because we still have quite a few. And I think officially the break starts in 1 minute, but if it's okay, we can maybe spend another 5 minutes on questions. I'll give you the next one and let's see what you think. So, is building a design system really necessary for a team? What are the minimum sources to build a good design system? And what are the costs of a low quality design system? So multiple questions in one, but
yeah, give me that first question again.
Is building a design system really necessary for every team? What are the minimum sources to build a good design system? And what are the costs of a low quality design system? So do all teams need it? How do you get a good one? And what's the cost of a low quality one?
Yeah, the first one is no. And I think that's the point of that section around what's the value you're providing and does the design system actually solve a problem for you? Yeah, it's about communication and collaboration and getting consistent experiences, and you can do that through not having a design system, for sure. But I would also say that a design system doesn't have to be big. So you know, I would count what I had on that project where, you know, we had a single page in an app as a design system. So I guess it's really about those tools that help you to collaborate and create a cohesive experience. Yeah. Did you want to add to that before we try the other two questions?
Yes, super quickly, I want to refer to the low quality design system. So I think this can have many, many different flavors, and it's different for each one of us what will represent a good quality or bad quality design system. But I would like to point out that if you think this has low quality, it might be because you need to go back to your users and understand if you're actually giving them value. So, and fix things on the way. So, yeah, I will tackle that one with that, trying to figure out if I'm actually giving good value with this.
And I think you
I guess low quality could be like, you know, that it has lots of bugs, or low quality could be it has lots of features I don't need, or it's difficult to use, or it's hard to understand, or yeah, there's a lot of things there, right?
Mm-hmm. And exactly, I think those things respond to the fact that if it's difficult to use, then ask them why, how can you improve that? So it's kind of this loop and keep coming back to how to fix these issues.
Oh, thank you. If it's okay, I'll throw another question at you. For all the participants, officially the break starts now, but if you're still interested, I'll ask a couple more questions to Marle and Esther to use a bit of the time that we have from the break. So the next question is, thanks a lot for the interesting presentation. Many points match our experiences. My question, if everybody contributes to the design system, how do you manage consistency in design and code? You mentioned QA. How in practice do you see this work?
Yeah, contribution is, I think, so in my experience, contribution has been, yeah, successful in like, I guess, sometimes not successful and sometimes successful. I think even getting people to contribute is one hurdle, and then you've got the quality of those contributions. I think maybe this will be a bit of a Thoughtworks answer, but sometimes pairing with people is quite helpful. So actually having someone who has maybe more experience in, I guess, the quality that's required for a design system, pairing with someone who has an idea and kind of working through it together. Yeah, that would be one suggestion. I don't know if you have anything else, Marla.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So what I have seen, and that's where I mentioned the balance between QA and experience. You do need to have, let's call it policies in place. You do need to have a set of rules that also you write when you start building things, right? You don't have to have the set of rules beforehand before you start building the first component. They're gonna evolve as the design system evolves. But I'm talking like things of how do you write your code? How is the API of the component needs to look like? Basic things as well in design. For example, if you have a library of sketch files, and that will contain the components like symbols, you will also want to have some rules around how do you have these files. They should be clean. You don't want to have any trash on these files. You only want to have the symbol, how the symbol needs to behave. So you need to start building up also this set of policies people need to follow. And that's where you get into that balance. So if these policies are too hard and everybody needs to review and they need to pass through different types of processes to get into the design system, it might be really hard for people to actually collaborate back. But if you leave them a chance to start small, to have prototypes, to feedback on top of the components, having this knowledge on how to build them, it could help. So it's how, yeah, I have experienced this.
Yeah, I've had like one organization, we just had a page that had lots of prompting questions, like, have you tested it responsively? Have you tested it on this browser? Have you because there were just the common things that kept coming up that were quality issues, and you kind of just start capturing them, and then you've got a reference for people kind of going forward.
I have another nice question that's a little bit related is, do product teams contribute next to their product development work also to the design system? And if so, how do you motivate them to contribute?
I've seen all different models for this depending on the setup of the organization. One project that I was on, we actually pulled all the BA type product people together, and we had a conversation about how we wanted to add it to the acceptance criteria of every story, that you either, if you updated something, that you updated in the documentation. So it was just in our definition of done. Yeah, I've had other ones. One thing, actually, another thought worker said to me, which I really liked, was just actually sometimes it can be helpful to leave some redundancies and then kind of, get kind of after you've done it 3 times, then work out what's common. Yeah, some thoughts, Marla?
Yeah, just to quickly add, yes, I mostly actually have built design system using this method. So at the beginning it's hard because you need to kick everybody to understand how this works. How do you contribute? Is there pull requests? You need to find this perfect kind of model of collaboration, which is gonna always evolve again. So at the beginning it's harder, but once you have something going, you get momentum. And you can use that momentum to keep, as we mentioned, encouraging people to keep contributing. And personally, I would like to go back to the guild. So if you have persons that can actually go back to a meeting, a guild meeting, and say, hey, we're going to build this new component. What do you think we could need as a company or as an organization to build it? So, and take that feedback back to the team so you can think about those things when you're building it. And it can actually help more people. Rule of thumb, also just, I think I forgot to mention, don't share for the sake of sharing. Share when actually other teams need it. Sometimes we can get really excited and start just putting a lot of things in the system, and then it starts losing value. So just actually figure out what you need to share.
Thank you, Male. I think the next question is also really interesting. And this one is around the value of a design system. And here the person is asking, I'm trying to pitch the value of a design system for our organization to one of our founders. I'm having trouble creating an estimated amount of time it would save. At the moment, I'm showing the value based on our velocity. Is there a formula?
No. I haven't come across one. If there is, if somebody else has one. I have seen people try to quantify like time spent redlining things or time spent, yeah, and then kind of try to multiply that by, you know, the number of people on the team and the salary of them. But I mean, yeah, I think maybe my thoughts in that situation would be, do you need their approval in order to start finding ways to work more efficiently and effectively? And, you know, if that's a design system later, then cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to quickly mention, this is a hard one because, yeah, I have experienced the same things. And something that works for us, it worked very slowly, but it worked, is that every time we feel the pain of not having one, we pointed out that we could have one. So whenever it was like, you're building that button, I also build it, but that other team already have it and they look different everywhere. Yes, look, if we build a design system, maybe that will help. So it takes longer, but it's also a good way to show the value of what it can bring now because you're feeling the pains.
I will give us one more question and then maybe we'll still have a 5 minutes break for everyone. How to make the design system not a limitation of what technologies or libraries the developer must use?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, this is that product thing where it's what's the alternative? What are you, who's your competition? And, you know, maybe here your competition is some other third-party library or building it yourself. Or I'm very big in carrots, not sticks with design systems. I think if you're just going to tell everyone they have to use it, that's I don't see that working particularly well. I think what you want to do is find the value and try to then make it easier for them to use it than not use it. There's the Netflix analogy of the paved road. Like, I just want to make it easier for you to get from A to B, and I hope the design system is the paved road through that. And I make sure that that's true by actually truly understanding the way that you work and try to create things that make it easier. You know, I've known a lot of developers who, you know, we have full stack developers, and that probably means that, you know, there's a part of the stack that they're less good at. And if you're less good at front end, then maybe you really love a design system because, you know, you kind of get the benefits of it without having to build it yourself. And if you know, are great at the front end part of the stack, maybe you feel strongly enough or passionately enough about creating the thing in the first place to be able to set what good patterns are, or you know, maybe you're really bought into good accessibility, or, you know, there's probably something that you can find to get excited about there. So yeah.
Yeah, and just want to add a little bit concerning technology and developers is we exactly have that thing that we want that independence of as a team choosing the technologies we want to use. So generally, if you look at design systems out there, they're mostly building one technology, so that means every team needs to use the same thing. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, I think it's a trade-off. I haven't yet figured out a way to make this work for every team if you have enough time to build in the different libraries. But I would say it's more like a trade-off. As teams, you need to make an agreement of what you want to use and why, and find the value there. And also, finally, is we have these things called design tokens. They're also a very popular term. Tokens are not really necessarily a technology they're building, and tokens are like the colors, the typography, the very basic things you need to have consistency across a product, and these things can be really technology agnostic as far as I understand. So you can start with that, but also, yeah, beware that you might need to get into agreements of what you want to go with.
One organization I worked with had a design system for over 5 years, and it was just basically CSS and really like, JavaScript that opened and closed an accordion. And that was actually one of the longest lived design systems that I'd worked with because it was technology agnostic. And, they just gave you, this is the recommended markup, this is how you structure it and the classes you need to apply to it. And, we don't care whether you're using React or Vue or, whatever.
Cool, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, Male, Esther. Thank you very much for letting me ask you so many more questions. There are still quite a few that have been asked, so maybe we can take the conversation to Twitter and exchange a little bit more there.